So after spending the last few weeks dropping multiple alcohol-infused dumps on Game of Thrones, I thought it was about time I took a break from hating and talk about something I actually enjoy. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the Resident Evil 2 Remake. Pour yourself a shot, sit back and enjoy as I take you deep into the world of
Resident Evil 2.
Now, it's no secret that I've been a big fan of the Resident Evil games most of my life. I love them almost as much as Brie Larson loves herself, and I've been happily blasting zombies, solving puzzles, and listening to goofy dialogue since I was 12 years old. The series has had its ups and downs over the years, but one of the things most fans agree on is that Resident Evil 2 was probably the best of the bunch. It successfully balanced the problem solving and exploration of the original while injecting more action, bigger weapons, more complex environments and more polished gameplay mechanics. It was just an all-round great game, and one that I happily gushed about in my own review last year. But one thing we can probably also agree on is that a lot can change in 20 years, and it's not exactly a looker by today's standards. The game was just crying out for a remake, and after the success of Resident Evil 7, Capcom decided to give the fans exactly what they wanted. Nice job, chaps. So for anyone that was raised in a cave in Siberia, Resident Evil 2 is a survival horror game set in the heady days of 1998. The plot centers around a mysterious viral outbreak in the small American town of Raccoon City, which turns most of the locals into mindless zombies and other hideously deformed monsters. It's a bit like Dundee, but with fewer teenage pregnancies. Anyway, it's up to you to fight your way out of the nightmare and expose the evil deeds of the sinister Umbrella Corporation. You play as either Leon Kennedy, a rookie cop on his way to his first assignment, or Claire Redfield, the sister of the first game's protagonist Chris, before he became the fucking Iron Fist anyway. So they're both heading to Raccoon City for different reasons. Claire's looking for Chris, who's gone missing after trying to expose the work of Umbrella, and Leon's just trying to get to the police station to start his new job. After a few shenanigans at a gas station on the outskirts of town, the two characters join forces and head to the police station to get help. That plan doesn't work out too well though, and pretty soon you're on your own. This is where the game proper begins. Your mission will be pretty familiar to anyone who's ever played a Resident Evil game before. Explore the deserted building you're stuck in, look for clues to what happened there, round up any survivors you can find and get the Terry Funk out of Dodge. Oh, and try to avoid the walking corpses that have infested the place. Along the way, you'll meet various supporting characters. Some are willing to help you, some need your help, and others, well, they're just assholes. Just like the original game, there are actually two scenarios to Resident Evil 2, and you have to play them both to get the full ending. Complete the first scenario with one character, and it'll open up the second scenario with the other, so you basically get to see the same events from a different perspective. You'll also access slightly different areas and complete some slightly different puzzles. It's a neat little system that means you have to play the game through 4 times to see all the possible outcomes. Although really, there's not as much variety as there was in the original, but I'll talk about that more later. You progress through a mixture of problem solving, exploration and combat. A lot of rooms and areas are sealed off to begin with, meaning you'll need keys and other tools to gain access and move on. You find these by exploring rooms, solving puzzles, picking up important objects and using them somewhere else. It's a pretty simple formula to be honest. Find a thing, combine it with another thing and use it on something else. Eventually you'll gain access to new areas which lets you pick up more items and solve more puzzles. Rinse and repeat. You'll also face threats along the way that you can either fight or try to avoid. A persistent and mostly indestructible enemy that follows you around to keep the tension high, and the occasional boss battles to test your skill and drain your ammo. The catch is that resources are finite and you only have limited carry space. This is where the survival element of Resident Evil really comes into play, because you have to learn quickly how to manage your limited resources efficiently if you want to stay alive. Load up on weapons, health and extra ammo and you'll struggle to carry the items needed to open up new areas, resulting in a slower and more frustrating gaming experience. Choose to travel light and you'll have more flexibility to pick stuff up on the fly, but you may leave yourself vulnerable if you get attacked. It's a constant balancing act, and there's no right or wrong way to do things, it just depends on what kind of player you are. But the big difference between the remake and the original is that the margin for error is a lot smaller now. In the original game, there were always more enemies than bullets to kill them, so you had to become skilled at dodging and weaving to conserve ammo. As long as you were smart and efficient, you'd usually be able to build up a reserve and cruise comfortably to your next boss fight, but not now. You're given just enough weapons and ammo to scrape by, provided you're careful, but there's rarely a surplus of anything, meaning you have to pick your battles carefully and make every shot count. And running away isn't the magical solution it used to be. Zombies can open doors and pursue you from room to room, which came as a bit of a shock when it first happened to me. I could be wrong, but I suspect there's also a bit of dynamic difficulty going on here, because anytime I started to build up a reserve of ammo, wouldn't you know it, along comes 2 or 3 zombies that suddenly have to be dealt with. So if you're like me and you prefer to clear out areas you know you're going to be traversing regularly, then you're in for a tough time. There's also a nice little mechanic where zombies can break through windows on the first floor and flood into certain rooms and corridors. You can barricade the windows to hold them at bay, but you haven't got enough resources to secure every room, so it's up to you to decide which areas are more important to hold and which ones you can afford to give up. And considering how scarce ammo usually is, you have to plan wisely on this one. And make no mistake, combat is not an easy prospect in this game. Weapon handling is slow and awkward, meaning it's hard to shoot from long range. You can fire on the move, but it kills your accuracy, so your best option is to stand still and let your enemy get in close, then blast away. The obvious downside is you have to put them down quickly, otherwise you're in trouble. Now, given the free aim system, you might think it would make sense to go for the head and try and put them down more efficiently. Nope. I tried this a whole bunch of times and it still took 4 or 5 headshots from a pistol to put down a single zombie. Like, what's the point in giving us the ability to target different body parts if it doesn't actually do anything? There's no reward for accurate shooting here and it feels like a bit of a cop-out. As I said before, the original game required you to master the art of dodging and weaving, and it became second nature after a while. Your character was reasonably fast and manoeuvrable despite the awkward control scheme, and there was usually enough space in the environments to slip by if you were quick. The fixed camera angles actually worked to your advantage at times, because you could see things directly behind and to the side of your character. But now, escape and evasion is enough to give my arse a headache. Your running speed's a lot slower now, you don't turn as fast, and your field of vision's a lot more restricted. Corridors are generally tighter and enemies move faster, so dodging your way around them is a much tougher job. It doesn't help that they don't really have an attack wind up that you can disrupt, they just kind of lurch into you and start chomping down. The result is that you're going to get hit more often, and it's kind of frustrating because it feels like you're in a no-win scenario a lot of the time. You don't have enough ammo to fight, but your character's too slow and clunky to effectively dodge. Another thing that pissed me off was the lack of healing items, especially in the later stages when combat gets more intense and you start taking more hits. There's a real lull in health pickups around the final third of the game, so unless you've built up a decent stockpile, then you're going to be struggling hard. I limped into the final boss battle at Death's Door, so needless to say it took me quite a while to get through. Although for some reason the game does have this weird habit of showering you with blue herbs for curing poison. It was frustrating because I was completely dry on healing items, but fucking drowning in blue and red herbs that I had no use for. Anyway, let's talk about the graphics and the level design. The game uses the same engine as Resident Evil 7, the only difference being the change in perspective, so needless to say it looks absolutely gorgeous. Environments are detailed and realistic, light and shadow effects are flawless, and the soundtrack and enemy noises are effectively used to create a tense, brooding atmosphere. You'll be mooching around in an office, and suddenly you'll hear the crash of a door breaking open, or a growl coming from somewhere deeper in the building, and you just know that bad news is heading your way. It really feels dynamic and unpredictable, like there's stuff constantly happening even if you can't see it. Whereas the original game quickly settled into the familiar Resident Evil rhythm once you understood its rules and limitations. Level design is generally great. The layout of the police station will be pretty familiar to anyone who played the original game. 2 main wings and a central hallway that allows you to access most areas, so you usually have a good sense of where you are at any given time. A lot of the rooms are so similar to the pre-rendered backgrounds from my childhood that I actually just had to stop and look around at times. It was uncanny. That being said, there's enough new areas to make exploration worthwhile, and the puzzles for the most part are totally different, so experienced players can't just breeze their way through them. My only real gripe about the police station is that it's pretty restrictive in terms of how you get from A to B. The original was this big, complex, interconnected area with multiple routes from one side to the other, and it offered you plenty of flexibility to plan your route. But this time around, lots of corridors and doorways have been permanently blocked off, which forces you down specific routes you might not want to take. The worst example of this is probably the first floor corridor in the West Wing. It's just a nightmare, overrun with enemies, filled with windows that zombies can break through, and eventually even lickers join the party. It's a complete ammo drain because it's too tight to dodge anything, and it just feels like a real cheap shot on the part of the designers. Anyway, that being said, the rest of the game world is pretty solid. Once you're out of the police station, you head down into the sewers for a bit of poo-encrusted fun. This is where I think the remake is a big improvement over the original. The sewer level in the original RE2 was a pretty linear set of underground corridors with a scattering of easy puzzles you could breeze through in like 15 minutes, but now it's a much bigger and more complex environment set across multiple levels. You have to do a lot of backtracking and navigation, there are plenty of hidden rooms to explore, the puzzles are a lot more challenging, and generally it's just a much more satisfying experience than before. The downside here is that the ruined factory level is missing this time around. It's a shame to see it go, but I can't say I blame the developers all that much. When you really think about it, the factory was just kind of an extension of the sewer level anyway, and most of it was just blasting your way through a few corridors worth of zombies before reaching the train that took you down to the lab, so I guess it's not a huge loss. But I'm gonna complain about it anyway because I'm an asshole. The only environment that feels like kind of a letdown is the final lab level. Don't get me wrong, it's big and there's enough going on to keep you busy, even though it's basically divided into two smaller levels with a ridiculously huge space between them, but visually it's pretty bland and disappointing. Much like with Resident Evil 7, the hyper-detailed environments of the first few hours eventually give way to more sparsely designed maps, and you get the feeling this was where the developers were forced to cut corners to meet their deadline. It's a shame that the game stumbles a little at the final hurdle. Enemies are your usual Resident Evil suspects. Zombies make up the bulk of the early game. They're slow, but they can absorb more damage than you think and overwhelm you in large numbers. Lickers are fast and agile, and they can deal a shit ton of damage, so you need decent firepower to take them on and try and put them down quickly. There's also these giant blob things down in the sewers that can come out of nowhere and totally fuck up your day, as well as these walking plants that vomit poison onto you and are basically immune to everything except fire. Arseholes. Then there's Mr. X, the tyrant that follows you around for most of the game. Now, this guy appeared in the second scenario in the original game, and I kind of expected him to show up in the remake, but Capcom pulled a little prank on guys like me by having him show up on my first playthrough. I was wandering innocently around the main hall, minding my own business, when suddenly I heard the soft thump of heavy footsteps getting closer, and then boom, he's right on you. Nice one, you dicks. Much like Jack from Resident Evil 7, he follows you around from room to room, fucking up your day at every opportunity. But he's much more intimidating than Jack ever was, because he's a total unknown quantity. You don't know what he wants or what his thought process is. He doesn't speak, he doesn't use weapons, he's just this massive hulking figure that slowly stalks you through the derelict building. You can run away from him, but he'll catch up to you sooner or later. You can put him down with enough firepower, but eventually he'll get up and come at you again. There's just no stopping him. Just like the zombies constantly trying to break in, the low ammo and the clumsy controls, Mr. X is just another element in the mix that ensures you never really feel safe in Resident Evil 2. You're never allowed to feel comfortable. Every room you go into is another calculated risk, because not only could there be enemies in there waiting for you, but Mr. X might decide to come in behind and trap you in there. Now, I'm not going to go into the plot too much, because honestly, there's not all that much to talk about. Evil corporations doing evil things, mad scientist goes too far and unleashes a plague on the world, secrets and betrayals all round. And of course, because it's Resident Evil, it all culminates in you blowing the shit out of some horribly mutated creature with a rocket launcher while a self-destruct timer counts down. Classic. The characters from the original game are all present and correct, although the goofy dialogue's mostly been ditched in favour of something a bit more mature. There's so many F-bombs getting dropped, It reminds me of visiting my terrifying gran when I was a kid. As far as protagonists go, Leon and Claire make for a pretty interesting contrast. Leon's a bit of a Dudley Do-Right and clearly way out of his depth with all the shit going on around him, but when the chips are down, he's able to stay cool under pressure and get the job done. Claire is tough and self-reliant, but she's also got a softer and more compassionate side that comes out when she takes a young girl under her wing. Although I do wish Capcom's various dev teams would share notes a bit more often about her, because fuck knows how she goes from this to this. Ada Wong made her first ever appearance in Resident Evil 2, and as much as she'd go on to become a ridiculous overpowered super ninja in later games, it's kinda nice to be reminded that she was once much more grounded and believable. Although the dry, sarcastic, I know so much more than you routine starts to get a bit old after a while. Resident Evil 2 is a game that gets a lot of elements right, but it'd be unfair for me not to point out some of the things it gets wrong. For a start, Claire and Leon have almost no screen time together now. In the original, they'd meet up at various points to exchange information, help each other out, or just generally open up a little about why they were there. And it made the second scenario much more interesting to play, because you got to see the other side of these chance encounters. But here they almost never cross paths. They see each other for like 2 minutes at the police station and then right at the end, and that's all. It just feels like a wasted opportunity, like it might be good to see them interact and help each other out a little. Likewise, the second scenario here just feels like a rehash of the main game instead of the other half of a complete story. The actions of a character in the first scenario have no real impact on your experience in the second. You even watch the same cutscenes and fight the same bosses in the same areas, so fuck knows how that's supposed to work. It feels lazy, dumb, and poorly thought out in a way the original game never did. The difficulty is challenging, but it's mostly in the early stages when ammo's scarce and your weapons are totally not equal to the task at hand. But once you're out of the police station and you get your hands on more serious weaponry, you're really not going to struggle unless you get trigger happy and waste all your ammo. Generally, I think the formula that's so well balanced in the first few hours starts to unravel a bit towards the end, where it feels like things start to get a bit rushed and haphazard. But honestly, I'm not going to mark the game down too badly for that sort of thing. Some minor gripes aside, Resident Evil 2 is a brilliant example of a remake done properly. It keeps all of the things that made the original so successful, it ditches the stuff that hasn't aged very well, and it brings it all neatly up to date with some of the best graphics that current generation consoles can deliver. It's weird, I feel happy just talking about it, and excited at the prospect of Resident Evil Nemesis getting similar treatment. But in the meantime, if you haven't played the Resident Evil 2 remake already, then go get it done, and tell them the drinker sent you. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Go away now.